All right, guys. Good morning, and welcome to the session on the future. Welcome to the session on the future of calling Microsoft APIs - Microsoft Graph. My name is Simon Jäger. I work as a technical evangelist at Microsoft, and what I do is pretty much what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of these 60 minutes. A little heads up, I'm being very foolish enough to run preview bits on this machine. It's my primary machine, and since coming here, I've had about 10 blue screens. Am I worried? Yes. Am I freaked out? Yes. So it may be that we're going to have like a 30, 45-second commercial break in the middle of it while I reboot the machine, but hopefully it'll be fine. I have two goals with this session. And if I can achieve at least one of them for each and every one of you, I'm stoked. I'm super happy. The first one is to give you an idea of what you can do. What does that mean? What is the future of calling Microsoft API? What is this Microsoft Graph? Why does everyone have a graph? I want to show you what it means and how it actually can solve something real. How can it make your life better? How can it make a development cycle faster? How can you create wow factors? How can it make it easier for you in one way or another? The other goal is to show you the learnings of this. I realize that we come here listening to a talk like this in different ways. Some want to see how this fits into what I'm doing, and others want to see, well, how can I apply what's going on here into what I'm doing and take learnings from that. So I want to share some of the things that goes into building this enormous thing called the Microsoft Graph while still keeping it scalable and consolidating so many different things into one place. I'm going to take you on a journey. We're going to go from maybe a level 100 content and slowly creep up to 200 and 300. I want to make sure that I grab each and every one of you and get you all up to speed. And as said, if I can achieve one of these two goals with each and every one of you, I'm super stoked. Do we have troubles?
You had internet?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm rocking my phone now, so it's all good.
Okay.
It's all good. All right. So the first thing that I need to do to get everyone up to speed is to talk a little bit about what is it? What is this thing called the Microsoft Graph? Why does everyone have a graph? This was born as something that was called the Unified API Endpoint. And today, I don't know if any one of you were at Build or even watched the Build conference. Was there anyone here at Build? None. One was at Build. Two was at Build. At Build, the Microsoft Graph had tons of love. You couldn't go anywhere without the Microsoft Graph being mentioned. And there's a big reason behind it. Now is a very good time to look at what it is. So it was born as this thing called the Unified API Endpoint. At this point, it was about consolidating all these APIs that we have at Microsoft into a single API. The reason wasn't just to put everything into one cool API. It was really to make it easier. Make it easier to engage with all these different things because they're out there, and they could most likely be something you could use to enrich those applications. And it was hard because each team had their own way of building an API, their own ideas of how to do REST. So what we wanted to do at that point a few years ago was to make one API and one convention that was sustainable and consistent so that we could make it easy to access all of that data. At this point, it was about data. But something beautiful happens when you've got access to this data. That's where the real power comes, and that's why a graph exists, and a graph becomes one of these buzzing things that everyone needs to have. It's sort of like machine learning and AI and a graph. Everyone needs to have it. No one understands what it is. But something beautiful happens when you finally have that data. Suddenly, you can start to realize there's a connection. Finally understand that there's a connection between this device, be that a Windows device, iOS, Android, doesn't matter. There's a connection between this device and this person, and this file, and this email, and this chat history. And when you start to do that, you create the graph. You get to understand the relationships. Out of these relationships, we create wow factors. That is the common denominator for why AI, machine learning, and graphs are this buzzing thing, is to generate and bubble to the surface wow factors. We need wow factors in whatever we're building. The reason is we're in a very mature state of our industry. If you were to come to me and say, hey, Simon, I've built this application that's it's able to stream bits from the server to your device wherever you are, and I pick music. So it's a music streaming service. I'm super excited about it. I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not excited by a music streaming service anymore. But if you come to me and I get your application, I go into it, it is still a music streaming application, but every single day I go in there, you get me a song in the morning, I never knew it existed, had no clue about the band name, the song name, but every time it is the best song I've ever listened to. If you can do that, sign me up. I'm your next customer, and probably a million more. Because that's what we're building these days. The things we're discussing, especially at conferences this day, are details, are wow factors. We're having wars about frameworks and ways to do REST and all these things. And it's about how do we make these tiny, awesome, cool, wow experiences that really make a difference. They make us competitive against all these other things. I still expect that music streaming service to be able to stream music, but now I expect that. 10 years ago, I was amazed by that. But now it's more about finding that derived data from the large set of data. So now that you finally have access to it, there's a bunch of things that you can start doing. And we do it. We do it in our own stuff. When you go and you want to collaborate and you want to search for someone else, we're going to show up front who is important to you. Who are the top 5 people that are important to you? Or who are the documents that are important to you? And we figure that out through these relationships. And if you want to use that, if you want to use the data, if you want to use those, what we call insights, the Microsoft Graph is your way to do that. It is your one-stop shop to get access to all of these things. Is it the data or is it insights? And there are tons and tons of things that you can do. I'm going to give you pointers to where to go to find the things that you can do. We're going to go through a couple of demos. I've got code and all that, but it will be impossible to demo everything. Instead, you're going to get pointers and you're going to get started and you're going to see some cool things and some silly demos as well. I also want to point out that I tried to talk to some of you yesterday and figure out what is the audience here. What are the tools and the languages of your heart? So I try to adjust the content to suit that. But I do want to say that it doesn't really matter. There's an idea right now of how we build our SDKs that I'm going to share so that you know how to use it once in one language, for instance, me showing it on the screen, and then you know how to use it everywhere. And it's not about jeopardizing the programming language flavor, but it's about keeping a notion of consistent primitives throughout these SDKs. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you as well. And now I totally thought that I would forget this because I have always done this throughout my practice runs. I need your help for the last demo that I'm going to do. So assuming that I don't have any blue screens and it all goes fine, we're going to have a demo where I need some data. So for one time only, I'm going to ask you to pick up your phones and be this naive dude that thinks that everybody has Twitter, probably. And what I need you to do is supply some data for me that we're going to use in the demo at the end. And it's totally a friendly demo, so you don't have to be worried. And what I need you to do is send a tweet that starts with, is this fine, by the way? Looks good. Starts with hashtag Microsoft Graph. That's the way I'll find you. And then please do not break my stupid regex with like a 1 in here or something. And lowercase with. And then what you're going to do is put in one word, a programming language, the programming language of your heart. What are you passionate about? So for me, I would probably put in Microsoft Graph with C#. So I'm even going to be as naive here and hit this and wait for someone to send at least one. There's already one. Oh, wait, 5 minutes ago. That's my friend. That doesn't work. Are we getting anyone here? I see phones. People are thinking hard about this decision. Which language is it? All right, nice. Oh, this is awesome. Beautiful. So with that, I'm going to let this just flow in, and all of that is going to get cached into a demo we're going to do at the end. So I want to get you started now and showcase some of the things and some of the ways you can go on about engaging and discovering what is it that you can do. What is this abstract thing of a graph? The very, very best and first place that you should go to is the graph homepage. Now, an easy way to get there is through graphmicrosoft.io. And this is your one-stop shop to discover everything you can do. And there's awesome tools in here that I'm going to show you, which is a very good way to explore and see what is this fuzz about. The first thing that you should do is to figure out what are the things in here that could work for me. What are the things that I could use in my applications, in my scenarios, that would be cool, that would enrich, empower, maybe a new solution or maybe an existing solution. So what you want to do is to go into this place, go to graph.microsoft.io and hit documentation up here. Go to the left, and in here, the first thing you're going to see is a bunch of different things that you can pull up. I like to live on the edge, so what I do is go down to, where is it? Oh, it's just my zooming. The beta reference, because that has even more stuff that's coming in. That is a good thing to know about. What we're doing here is developed in two different branches. We have what we call the version 1, that is production-ready stuff. For anyone that's building stuff for the enterprises and on that sort, yeah, we need to rely on things that they are actually going to stay the way that they are, that we aren't going to break you and that stuff. But if you like to build and check out new things, the beta reference, the beta branch, is a good place to check out. It has lots of cool things in here. And we take tons of feedback on this as well. So whatever you're going to find in here, if there's something you feel like, I don't like this, the way that I use this, I like this information as well, you can provide that feedback easily, and we'll incorporate that into the beta reference, and you can see that happening. And you can see that happening throughout the changelog on this page as well. So assuming you're in the beta reference, it doesn't matter which one you go to, there's tons of different things you can do here. You can do everything from list users in Office 365 and groups, and pull out things from Azure Active Directory, which is, if you're using an Office 365, that is based upon an Azure Active Directory. You've got an Excel node in here. And that's not just making an Excel file. No, that is a rich, deep API, which allows you to drill into a specific column in an Excel file and even apply formatting on a very specific column. It's a very rich API, and it's all through REST. In addition to that, at Build, we released Teams. Under People and Social, you have much of those insights where you can discover relevance and relationships. I'll showcase some of that. And we even have things in here now in the Microsoft Graph which you can't find anywhere else in the Microsoft ecosystem. There are being APIs added to this thing that aren't exposed anywhere else. Some of you may know that, well, Azure Active Directory, I've been able to talk to that for years. Well, there are now APIs in here that you can't access in any other way, because this is our way forward. Having a single set of API and a consistent experience, which makes it so easy for you to just add features. If you start out and then figure out, hey, I want this thing as well, or something new comes along, you just plug it right in because you're already set up. You got OneDrive here, which is interesting because if you expand it, you can see we have a notion of drives. What I want to put in your head here is you've got different OneDrives, right? You've got different drives. You've got OneDrive for consumers. You've got OneDrive for business. And who says this couldn't be a SharePoint document library? That's the point. As developers, we don't care. What is it? I care about maybe giving my users the ability to store files in their own cloud. Maybe it's about giving the users the ability to look for files using your application in their cloud storage. That's the point. So if you can have a single way of addressing all of that, that's perfect, because that means it doesn't matter where the user is coming from. Is the user coming from and signing in with an Office 365? Great. Is he coming in with a Hotmail, Outlook, Live account? Great. You have one API to address all of those. And if you wanted to, of course, you can pull down those drives and look into, well, where do you actually come from? Not that it really matters where it comes from, because you still have a unified API to address that. In addition, one note, you've got extensions, which is something we're going to look at throughout code. Extensions is a great way of extending this graph and putting your stuff in here, putting your data so that you could offload things that maybe you don't need to manage a database for. What if I just could store this little piece of data or lots of data on existing nodes in this graph and then just pull them instead of managing a database? And then you've got more things like SharePoint and webhooks. There's so much stuff in here, and they're always adding things. So a great place to get started, figure out what you want to try. And some of these things we're going to look at. Once you've done that, your next step is to hit the Graph Explorer. The Graph Explorer is a way for you to try out these things that you found without having to fiddle with code or SDKs or deal with tokens or any of that. You don't even have to sign in and do that kind of stuff. All you need is just to go in here, and you've got like a Fiddler experience here. I bet you're using Fiddler, right? There's quite a few. So it's a mini Fiddler, so to speak, that solves authorization and all of that. So if I just go in here right away, you see that there's a URL here. It starts with graph.microsoft.com. That is the endpoint. It's the one endpoint you need to go to, nothing else. Which, if you're familiar with OAuth, creates a good experience. Because if you've dealt with OAuth tokens from the Microsoft ecosystem before, you know that there's a resource claim in those. That resource claim points to the resource, which would be, in this case, the graph.microsoft.com. So you have one resource that you can use to access all of that. In the past, that meant having multiple tokens because that resource would be different and it would be invalid if I went to another resource. So you would keep juggling so many different types of tokens and keeping them up to date and refreshed that just this in itself is awesome. The next thing is to specify that branch. So as I said, we've got two, version 1 and then beta. And it's just as simple as going like this. Hit beta and then you change it. Because we're in a graph, you've got nodes. You need to start somewhere. A great place to start is the me node. So if you sign in, if a user has signed in on your application, they have the me node, which is yourself. And if I just hit enter and run that, I'll get some basic information about, well, who is me? And that could be, that differs depending on where me came from. In this demo, I have an automatically signed in with an Office 365 account. So I get details from an Office 365 account. If I signed in with an Outlook or Live or something else, I would have different information here. Some things would be consolidated, like you've got display names and mails and first name and last name, so that is consolidated where it makes sense. Some things are specific to depending on what the user is coming from. And let's do something like this. Me/people, which is, if you drill down in documentation, is one of those insights that you can get from pulling down and looking into the relationship. So now I'm getting the relationship between me, myself, and people around me. And it's figuring out that, well, manufacturing operations is probably like a group that I'm talking to a lot. So it figured out that this thing is probably very important to you. And then you can find sources. You can even find in here, why was this thing important? It figures out it's important because you email them a lot. It figures out it's important because you chat and IM with them a lot. So you can also understand, why does this thing come up here? And both groups and people and all of those are going to come in here. And you can find documents and all of that in the same manner. And that's the experience we have. That's the experience we provide if you go to Office 365 and all those places. This is what we use. So you can tap into and just pull that out. And what if you could just use that? We build lots of social things today. Whatever app, we have some chance of communicating with someone else. Why don't you just use this and allow it to just show the top 5 users right away, which are the relevant people to that person? Or maybe it's just a good way for you to figure out who your next user and customer is and create a personalized experience and say, maybe you should invite this person, which is either a very creepy experience or a wow experience. But it's all right here and super easy to use. The next thing I want to show quickly in this one is how do we go on about addressing customers in different places? We are fortunate to be in a place where we have a good internet connection. I'm rocking my phone here and doing this stuff. But there are the places where the bandwidth isn't the same. So how can we be sure to actually build our applications and call APIs in a manner that is responsible, where we can essentially pick out what is it that we need? So what I want to do here is actually go into this person's mail. So I'm going to drill down into those mail folders. I know that there's an inbox. I know that there are messages here. If I hit enter, my poor phone is working. I've got the emails of this user. But this is a lot of stuff. What if I can just supply how is this supposed to look? And there are great ways of doing that already. OData, for instance, is a great way of doing that. It's an open standard for doing exactly that. And that is one way that we've built this thing, using open standards, not reinventing the wheel, using JSON or using the ability to request what is the type of data format that you want. And to show you how that OData looks, all we do is to append the $sign. We don't have to anymore, but I like to keep it. And we can specify parameters in here. We can do everything from filtering and searching, but this allows the graph to do the work for us. As you can see, I've only got the ID and the body now. So I can be very clever about what are the pieces that I need to not be taxing on the bandwidth here. And maybe in this country it doesn't make sense, but in other countries it does make a difference. And it may or break the customer experience for you. So with that, you can do much more. You can do paging, and what you'll also find that we also provide little links in here that allow you to help with paging. So assume you have thousands and thousands of messages. Well, you won't pull that down in one query. But you've got links in here, what's called a next link, which is a prepared OData, which has a prepared OData statement, which keeps your selected things in here, but also allows you to skip 10 and then work on your paging. So it's super, super smooth. And then we added something here, which I love. It was like a week ago or so. So what I'm going to do is to sign in, because now I'm using this demo account. I want to use and see have my own data in here. So if you go in and pull up the developer console while in the Graph Explorer, and you type the following: token, please, you get a token that you can explore and test with. This is awesome. This means I don't have to figure out the SDKs to do this. We're going to look at that, and you'll see how that works, and we're going to look at how you do that with HTTP requests as well. So it's a great way to just get that token and put it in your code and get started. This one's going to work for about an hour. So you got to make sure to stay within that hour, and then you're going to get funky errors. So what I'll do is just token, please, copy that. And to show you that I know how to use Fiddler. It's not really an achievement. I'll compose a just pure HTTP request, and you'll see what is the Graph Explorer actually doing here. So I took that token, and I'm going to just put in that endpoint, graphmicrosoft.com, specified branch, beta. I'll do me again. And the only thing that I really need is to put that token, authorization, which is a bearer token. Really? That's not going to work. And now I put in the bearer token and execute the request. It's going to come back, and that's the same data that I got. A bearer token is a token which is like a movie ticket. You can give it to anyone else, and we don't really check who it is that's using it, and it's valid until the movie is practically over. So it works in the same way. So it's a good way to get started. You can just grab a token and then pull up your code in your favorite language and start trying to make things happen. So it's a good way to get started. So I want to ease you into this process of learning, see what you can do, try the Graph Explorer, get the token, and then get started in your code, which is exactly what I want to do and spend the rest of the time with. So I have nothing in here in this little program that I have. I just thought that I went into an Office 365 tenant that I have, and it's a little boring. It's all the parameters I look into, they're very businessy. You've got, display names and all these properties that are in the Azure Active Directory. So what I thought is that I would extend the schemas of this directory and add some more fun parameters to it. So my idea was that I would add a joke to everything in my directory. So every user and every group is going to have a parameter which is a joke. It's a one-liner that you can put in there, which is going to make exploring the Graph Explorer and all of that a bit more fun. So the first thing I want to point out is that I have went into NuGet and I got the installed Active Directory Authentication library. It is a library that allows me to sign into that Office 365 account. You don't have to use this. You can use whatever you want to use. If you want to use ADOL for short, if you want to use Microsoft Authentication Library to sign in Outlook people instead, or Active Directory accounts as well, you can use that. If you want to make your own HTTP requests and perform OAuth flows, you can do that, and we will do that. The only thing I don't have in here is a Microsoft Graph SDK. You could absolutely just go in here, browse and search for the Microsoft Graph and download it. Instead, I want to show you another way that I did it. The only reason I did it like this was because I wanted some more features, essentially. The graphs are open source. They're in GitHub. If you go to the Microsoft Graph GitHub repository, all the SDKs are in here. So what I did was to clone it, build it, and then just put it into my project. The only reason is because I went into the dev branch. And in the dev branch, we're working on version 1.4, which has schema extensions, which is exactly what I want to do. I want to extend the schemas with my silly parameters or properties. So to do that, I just put them in here, and then I reference those. So to start off, I've got nothing in here. Let's go ahead and actually get a little bit of a base going. So I want this method where I'm going to run, which I'm going to run asynchronous. I'm going to block it beautifully. It's terrible. And in here, we're going to work in here. I'm going to first and foremost figure out the authentication. And what I'm doing is using the Active Directory Authentication Library, ADOL. And what's going on here is that I'm putting in and using this SDK. This SDK doesn't have no idea what I'm doing, that I'm supposed to work with the Microsoft Graph. It doesn't care about that. The way this particular SDK works is that I put in what is the tenant that you're trying to sign in with. I have an account in SimonJ on Microsoft.com. So I just put in that I'm going to sign into this one. And then I say, I'm going to sign in, and I want a token, that token please thing, for the graph, the Microsoft Graph. And then I have an application registration in that Azure Active Directory, which essentially I just put in the ID of. And then in there, I could specify anything. Because it's a web view, it needs to know when we're done. And I just said, well, when you get to MS Graph NDC Oslo, authentication is done. And I could put in just anything in here. And then I just make sure to always prompt for a login, because I'm on my corporate machine, and it always thinks that I'm signing into my Microsoft account, which I'm not. So I'm making sure that I always prompt here. Once we have that, we can go ahead and set up the Microsoft Graph SDK client. And this is a way that we have been able to structure these SDKs. The Microsoft Graph, because you have so many different ways of actually figuring out authentication, it all depends on what you're building, what can you do. Are you building a headless solution? You have different properties and different things that you can do. Are you building a mobile app, a web app? You have different things, again, that you can do. So because of that, we can't design an SDK, and it would be foolish to design an SDK that does it all. Instead, we allow you to pick your way of doing it. Maybe you already have a way of doing it. And then just supply the result of that into the Graph SDK. And in here, we just use a delegate to essentially give you the request that the SDK is about to perform. And your job is to put the token in there. And we don't know where that came from. So that is the way we go on about setting up every Graph SDK. It doesn't matter what the platform is, the programming language, this is the way you're going to do it. And then you're going to have other similarities as well. And next up, let's go ahead and actually get started. I want to go now and get the schemas that I have in this particular tenant that I signed into. The way I do that is use the Graph client, and then I have so many different things that I can look into, pretty much many of those things that you see. Can you see in here? I found schema extensions, and then what you build is a request. It's going to look similar in every language. You're going to build a request, and then you're going to say, all right, you've got the request. What are you doing now? I'm going to get. You could do more things like adding and stuff, which is a patch and all of those. So that's the way to do this. So this way, I pull down all the schemas. I then look at, is there a schema with this name? The Microsoft Graph NDC Oslo. And then I have some boring boilerplate code if I don't have that schema. Well, then I just create that. I create that schema with that ID, and I tell everyone to make sure that this extension is useless. It does nothing. And then I define how it looks. I have a name, which is a one-liner. The type is a string. What are the things that I'm extending? I'm extending users and group. So every user and group is now going to have that property. And then I go ahead and just add that schema. Now, let's try to wrap this one up. What I do next is I want to then work with this. I have appended it to all the users. So then I go users, I create a request. And what I'm doing here now is to do this OData query. I'm picking out select, but you can see that all those OData operations that you can do, like filtering and expanding, are also in here. So I'm saying that I want the display name, and I also want this particular schema that I have created. And then we say get ready, because now we should have everything. So let's wrap this up. We'll just loop it. We'll look through the additional data, which is where that schema data is going to be in. Then we read that data, and then we print it. I have prepared 3 users with data in that schema. So everyone has the schema, but that doesn't necessarily have any data in there if you don't put it in there, so to speak. And then, so the first thing here that's going to happen is this sign-in flow. And I'm going to sign in with a user that belongs to that tenant that I pointed out. And this is Adol doing its thing. And hopefully my phone is not going to break. Get ready. So now we've pulled down the users. We know what that data is. So if we hit enter, it's going to look in the Simon user, and then it's going to pull out his one-liner. My software never has bugs. It just develops random features. Billa G says Unix is user-friendly. It's just very selective about who its friends are. And the finished one is programming today is a race between software engineers trying to build bigger and better idiot-proof programs, and the universe trying to produce bigger and better idiots. So far, the universe is winning. And this made my tenant and my experience with those schemas a little bit more fun. Totally useless. But for any developer that goes in and pulls down this data, they're going to have a laugh, which is my intention with this graph, which is experience. So in this one, you saw I'm using an SDK. I've got ADOL and all of that wrapped up in here to work with that schema and pull them down. But what if we had a little different approach? So my next thing that I'm going to do here is to assume I don't have the Microsoft Graph SDK available on my platform or my language, or I don't want to use an SDK. Although I highly encourage you to do, because there is a hide-and-seek champion, which is the semicolon that we all forget, and then we spend hours to find it. And that's the reason we use SDKs. But what if we don't? What if we don't have it, and what if we don't want to use it? But I still have ADOL. I still have that Active Directory Authentication library. The reason I want to show you this scenario is because it's highly likely that you'll be, if you're writing in an obscure language, that there is an ADOL library because it's been around for a long time. The ADOL library has been worked on and developed for years, and they have very good platform coverage. But Microsoft Graph SDK is very new, so we haven't had the chance to get it everywhere, although it is in very many of the platforms that exist in our mainstream, so to speak. So we're going to start off in the same fashion that, I want to create this beautiful run async guy, and we're going to block it. And for this one, I'm actually going to use and be a little bit more sophisticated and have some classes. I'll explain what I'm going to do. What I will do here is to go into the graph, have a user sign in. It doesn't matter what kind of user, and I'm going to pull down that profile picture. And that could be a good thing for anyone wanting to use that. I mean, if you want to allow a user to sign in, pull down their profile picture and put it in somewhere. It makes for a cool experience. It's personal. Like that's my picture. It's in your place. But what I'm going to do is take that picture. I'm going to send it to the Emotion APIs, because no session at this conference is great if you don't have machine learning in it. Everyone needs to have some form of machine learning. So I'm going to send it to the Emotion API, and I'm going to look into these properties and see how angry do I look, disgust, fear, happiness, and get a result of that. And then I'm going to take that result and put it into my OneDrive. I'm going to share that file and get the link finally. So it's this awkward back and forth just to illustrate what's happening and what's possible and what's going on and how do you do this. The picture, I think, is this one that I'm going to send, because I'm going to sign into this account and then you'll know which picture, which is kind of like a neutral picture, and we'll see what the Emotion API is going to say. So these are my helper classes. It also pulls out the face rectangle. When Facebook knows where the rectangle of the face is, that's what I'm going to get here. So to start off, I'm going to create, a couple of methods. And the first one is going to be to get the photo. So the getting photo method is going to assume that you've got an access token. And we're going to pull that through ADOL. The difference here, as said, was that I don't have a Graph SDK. So instead, I'm just making a bare-bone REST call to probably very familiar, graphmicrosoft.com. I'm using the V1 endpoint because I consider this solution to be very mission critical to what I'm doing. I'm pulling down me and then /photo. Photo is just metadata for that photo. You've got sizes and stuff. But if I do $value, I get the actual bits for that photo. And then I just pull it awkwardly into a stream and then return the bytes. Next up, we're going to analyze that photo, which is using the Emotion API in Azure. It's making an HTTP request. I've got my key here, which is nicely hidden, and posting to the Emotion API, which is located here. It's very straightforward to do so. I'm just posting those bits essentially to that API, and then it returns me an exact response, which is going to print, and we'll see how angry I look and how much fear I feel, and how neutral and sadness and all of that. And it will be your daily dose of machine learning. Finally, as said, I will take that response, put it in OneDrive, my personal OneDrive, and I will create the file, and I will share the file, and I'll get back a link. So we'll have this round trip from Office 365 to the Emotion API, back to my machine, and then up to OneDrive. And let's go ahead and combine everything, which is doing the exact same thing. I'm using the ADL library, same properties, all of that. But then I'm taking out that access token from the result and just pushing that into the methods that needs it. So that's the way I could use this and do this without having a Graph SDK. Just make bare bones, super straightforward, easy HTTP requests to that endpoint. Super straightforward. Let's cross our fingers, because now we're going to download images, and we'll see how the phone is going to react to this. I'm going to use the same account because you've seen that picture, so you know how it looks. But I could have signed in with anything else here. I could have signed in with, if I wasn't using ADL, I could have used the Microsoft Authentication library, and then I could have signed with this account, and then signed in with the personal Microsoft accounts as well. And that's a big deal with the Microsoft Graph as well, is this entire thing of, I don't care where you're coming from. Let's just get to the important stuff, which is getting the photos, getting the OneDrives. I don't care where they are. I know that they're fundamentally very different services, but let's have one place of doing that, because as developers, it doesn't matter. I just want to bring the features and functionality into whatever I'm building. So let's hope that this is going to work. I've got a result. It looks like I am looking pretty neutral, and I should have had a console read key there. Oh well, that works. Actually, we don't need to do this. So I had a result there. The numbers were ranging from 1 to 0, 1 being I'm very sure that you are very angry, and 0 being nothing, essentially. That's why you saw very small numbers. And what could you use this for? This could be very cool also to be like, say someone is uploading an image, a profile picture to your place, or you're storing that in the graph. Why not? You could give feedback and say, well, this profile picture looks a little angry. Shouldn't you upload a more happy one? And fun stuff like that. This was actually not too bad, because now I can just show you, if I refresh this one, that in here I have a funky file with a weird name, which is the daytime tick. And in here is the response of that result that I got from the Emotion API. So what I did was just this funky run trip back and forth using the Microsoft Graph. And again, it didn't matter that this OneDrive, this particular OneDrive, was a OneDrive for Business. And let me show you how that looks. Let's make sure that we can see this. Boom. And then posting. I'm making awkward line breaks, but it'll work. So what I'm doing is I just make a PUT request. In doing so, to the drive, I get my own drive. I'm going from me to my drive. Again, don't care where that's coming from. I'm using the root, and then I'm putting in a file name. And that file name is defined just by the current ticks, and then /content. If I do a put /content, that is the file content. If I just do the file, that's the metadata for that file. And that has navigation properties to other users and relationships from that file. But this way, at this point, it doesn't even exist. I'm just doing a PUT request, and the graph is smart enough to figure out, hey, you're probably creating a file. So it's taking those bits and putting them in there and creating that file. What I'm then doing is using the same name, using the same path, but going /create link, which is a post request. What I'm posting there is, what type of link are you creating? It's the same experience if you were actually to go in there and click on share, and then you'll know that you'll have an option of, do you want someone to be able to edit this? Do you want someone to be able to view this? This is the same thing. You're specifying, is this a view link? Is this an edit link? And what's the scope of this? And then I just pulled that response and then showed the URL, which is what you didn't see, but we could locate that file in OneDrive. So with that, I want to get to the demo that has your data, which, let's see how we do this. We'll do this the following way. Oh, I know one I missed. Oh, sweet. We'll go in here because I want to showcase this as well. My flows. So what I've done, which is what you'll see here, let's just edit this. So we'll soon get to my very poorly written regex. But so far, what happens, or what I wanted to do is to illustrate, yes, sure, you can create files and do schemas and do pull the user, but it's all kind of basic. How deep can I actually go? So I want to show that how specific I can be using the Excel-rich APIs. When you posted the tweet, I created a Microsoft Flow. The Microsoft Flow is sort of like a workflow platform that allows you to build these steps where things will kind of flow through. The starting point is the following one. When a new tweet is posted with hashtag Microsoft Graph, and this search text is a little bit more, let's say, sophisticated than what I'm doing down there. I could probably just do hashtag Microsoft Graph with, but I wanted to show that I'm fancy and I can do a condition in here. So what I do is once the tweet is posted, the tweet comes into the next step with a condition. And I've got all the properties of that tweet, URLs and names and all that stuff. So what I'm saying here essentially is, well, tweet text, if that contains with, and this is where you could go into an advanced mode and do like lowercase and uppercase and stuff, but I got scared and I got back into the basic mode. And then I forced you to stay with lowercase with. Also to not break my regex. And if this condition is met, it'll go to the yes stage. The yes stage is an HTTP request that goes into an Azure function that I've created. What it does is just posting. It posts to that function, and it builds a new request body that has the tweet text and who tweeted it. And I also pulled in some super advanced security on this thing. I will not forget my password anymore. If I do, I'm stupid. So make sure that this communication is solid between those things. And so that's contacting an Azure function. An Azure function is essentially this is the other bus thing, right? This is the serverless compute. This is where we're able to just upload some piece of code and then have the cloud take care of running that. What it has is an HTTP trigger. So it triggers on an incoming HTTP request, which is what we're doing. We're sending an HTTP request. And I've got an HTTP result as well as an output. So I'm just responding essentially with a status code and saying that I'm okay, which tells Microsoft Flow that I'm happy. And then I also wanted to make sure that I'm super cool with knowing what's going on. So I made sure that selected HTTP methods that are allowed are only posts. So because I know that's the only thing that's going to happen. So the code that I have in here, which is loading. Can I have syntax highlighting? Yes. Is a JavaScript world. I chose to do something else because I also know that JavaScript is a big one. And this case is interesting because in this case, I don't have any UI. I can't have a user signing in. So how on earth do I get an access token? Well, in this case, we need the application to sign in. And we do that when I register the app in Azure AD, which is one place you can register your app. You can also register your app at identity.microsoft.com, which is more easily, you can sign in with anything. But when you do that, you get a client ID and a client secret. The client ID and client secret is sort of your application's very secret credentials. So here I'm exposing everything I own by showing you the client secret, which I totally have to change after this. But that's a good example of what would you do if you're building a server solution that doesn't have the ability to show any UI. So the first thing that I do, because this triggers on HTTP requests, I know that there's going to be a request, and from that request, I grab the body, which is what we created in Microsoft Flow. I log it, and then I create this little data variable or constant, which has familiar properties. What I'm doing here is exactly what the Azure ADOL library was doing. It's saying that you've got resource, graph, you got a client ID, you got a client secret, and then I'm specifying grant type, which is what is the way that you're authenticating. And if I was signing in with the user, that's a different, that's what changes the way you're signing in. Then I use the library Axios to post that to the following endpoint, which is this ID could have been Simon J on Microsoft.com. This is essentially a URL to my Office 365 directory because I'm trying to sign in with account to that. And then the OAuth token endpoint. I will stringify that piece of data. It won't let me go. I have scrolled. Let's do this. And now I'm done. I've got that. I'm assuming I've got the response, and in the response, there will be an access token. And now I'm doing something very familiar here. I am initializing the graph client by providing, well, not a delegate really in this way, but I'm providing here a little Lambda expression that does sort of the same thing. It provides the result of the authentication. I don't know where it came from, just give me the result. And this is the way you do it. Now, you've got the client ready. And here comes my terrible regex expression that I've talked a lot about, which is what I use to pull down the language that you put in. Once I have your language, I know the tweet content, I know who tweeted, I put in a date to this, and of course I put in the language in here. Now I want to put that into the file. I wanted to add a row in the Excel sheet. So in this case, I'm being very strict about where that file is. But you could obviously do queries and look into what users and files and see where that file is. But in this case, I know that it is in this user. Remember, I'm signing file. And notice how far I'm going here. Thank you. Notice how far I'm going here. I'm drilling down to that user. I've got the workbook. I've got the worksheet. I'm drilling down into the sheet. And then I found the table. And I go into /rows. And then it's normal REST and CRUD operations to whatever you want to do here. And that applies to anything in here. Is it user? Is it rows? Is it anything in between? You can work with that as you're familiar with. So doing your regular post and gets and puts and patches and deletes, it works here. So what I'm doing is, now that I've constructed this URL, I will be posting those rows there. And if I had kept the logs running, you would have seen that all those tweets coming in here, but I forgot about that. Now, I don't fully trust this one because it needs to be refreshed, but I have a few missing in here because I know I saw more. Maybe you messed up my regex. So in here are at least a few of the tweets that I was able to catch. So bear in mind, it's me messing up in the flows and the regexes. If you do it right, they'll all end up in here. So in here are those parameters that I just put in here, and then they keep being added. And what I love about being in here is if I'm in here and I'm editing in my browser, it's so cool to see that it's going to actually say that, hey, someone else is editing in here, which is kind of freaky. But that's your API calls also working in here. So you could have and build pretty cool collaborative experiences in here with services starting to work with data and do things. And it's really super cool. And then you can do what I've done here, which is just apply charts to it and have things happening. What you also can do is take those charts and pull them down and use them in your solution. So you could just keep an Excel sheet as some form of computing power and chart engine and pull those charts into your solution. You can also use those functions and have Excel here perform those functions for you. And you could use that, oh yeah, everyone picked C#. I thought that totally broke. So you can really use all those cool features and the reasons why people use Excel, pull them into your solution and use them. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So to end up, or to finish up and wrap up, you've seen a couple of demos, quick demos in different scenarios. And again, as said, you've seen it once, and now you should sort of understand how it works in whatever you're doing. So if I'm doing something crazy here, like I'm writing something in Go, I don't have any language SDKs in this case. Well, you can do this, get that access token the same way I showed in the JavaScript. Go out and make a request and pull down users and do the things that you want to do. And the similarities, if I go to something else, which I find scary, like Ruby. Well, in here, you've got libraries. And then you have, in this case, this sample is a server solution. You've got libraries in this case, and I'm doing a server solution which still allows me to do that credential grants flow, but I'm doing it through the library. So I'm just supplying the IDs and secrets and all of that again. So there are familiarities in here, and you know the structure, but yet you are keeping the flavor of the language. So notice, for instance, which is something that ADOL is doing as well, the way that we work with this in Ruby is not something that we came up with. It is an expected way. This is how I expect libraries to work in Ruby. The same goes for C# with, for instance, async keywords and capitalization of the first word. And in JavaScript, you expect something else. We keep the same consistent primitives for it to make it easy. And the takeaway from this is graph.microsoft.io. It's your one-stop shop to test, see what you can do, and find little things that you can use in your solutions to make them better, to make them cooler, and create little wow factors, or just offload stuff to make it easier for you. It's all out there. It's only for you to just grab and run with. So with that, I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.